alongside Jesse Finney. This is the Hit Squad, and we are excited for a good interview. I want to get right into this because I do have a lot of questions. We're talking to MMA Insider with ESPN.com. He's a writer. He goes to the fights. He interviews them all. He's Josh Gross. Josh, are you there with us?
I am here. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. And now, first thing I want to ask you, of course, is July 6th in Vegas. It's going to be Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman. Talk about how excited you are for this fight and give us your prediction on who you think will win.
I'm really looking forward to the fight. I think anytime you have a chance to watch Anderson Silva fight at this stage, it's always a great event. I was fired up to see him fight Stephan Bonner, and that bout was really a joke. This one is not. Chris Weidman, it looks like a legit challenger to his middleweight title. A lot of people are picking with Weidman to win this fight. I'm not going that far. I understand why they're doing it, but I can't bring myself to that point. I've seen nothing in Anderson Silva to lead me to believe that he's slowed down or he's less accurate or less interested than he was a year or two ago. And so I'm going to pick him to win just because I think he is the best fighter in mixed martial arts history. I think he's deserved that title for a lot of reasons, and he's still the same man that he's proven himself to be over the years. So I think he'll find a way to win.
So you are going with Silva. Now my question is, Dana White has promised us a super fight by the end of this year, whether it's Jones and Silva or Silva and GSP. Now in an article on ESPN, GSP kind of Silva alludes that GSP might be kind of ducking the super fight. And I just wanted to get your thoughts and feelings on that.
Well, it's tough to say ducking. St. Pierre certainly has not been the kind of guy who's been overtly asking for the fight. He's been hedging between the weight classes. Silva's gone so far, and his team's gone so far to say, we'll fight at 170, and that hasn't done much for GSP. It sure sounds like St. Pierre's not terribly interested. Now, he's got a murderer's row of challengers at 170, so it's not like he's avoiding tough fights. But yeah, it doesn't seem like that's the biggest priority for GSP. Silva is basically chalking it up to, I think his take is that he doesn't believe that GSP believes he can win the fight. And I think maybe there's some truth to that. I was never in that camp. I still believe if they met today, even if the fight was at 185 pounds, which I don't think it should be, I think it should be a catch weight of about like 177. But even if the fight's at 185, I think St. Pierre's speed, his athleticism, his wrestling make it an interesting fight. I would pick Silva to win. But it doesn't seem like that fight's happening. If you're looking for a super fight, Silva-Jones is the one that I think has taken the lead in terms of the one people want to see and is most likely to get made.
When do you think that fight will actually take place in this? Do you think it'll take place in this calendar year?
Well, look, Silva has to get past Weidman, which is no guarantee, and then Jones has to get past Alexander Gustafsson in September, which I think also will be a fight where people can say, maybe there's a chance here that Jones stumbles. I don't think so. Now, as far as the fight, look, if Jones is fighting in September, then it would have to be the very end of the year. The UFC had already talked about, and then Dana White publicly talked about, if they had made that 20th anniversary card in New York, that was the fight they wanted to put together. So there's already been some thought about putting this bout on for the end of the year. Could I see it happening in December? As you figure you got to give Jones a little time to decompress and get back in the gym and train. It's possible. I'm going to say no, just because we've been talking about these super fights for 5-6 years now, and they haven't happened. But I do think if it doesn't happen into this year, I can certainly see if they keep winning that it will happen sometime next year.
Well, let me ask you this: What if Chris Weidman throws a wrench in this whole thing and goes out and beats Anderson Silva? Does that really take the mystique away from the whole big fight?
I think certainly in the near term it would quell that, and I would understand why. Look, if Silva loses, he'll get an automatic rematch against Weidman. Dana White's already said that, and I think that's deserved. So it certainly wouldn't happen in 2013. If Silva comes back and beats Weidman, then maybe you can go back to the super fight. But I understand why people want to see these bouts. I mean, you're talking about guys that are in the top 3 pound for pound in the world, and the opportunity to see them fight is really appealing. But I think sometimes there's too much focus on them, and I don't mean that about your questions in particular. I'm just saying in general, the Weidman-Silva fight is a great fight, and people should take it for what it is and sort of revel in that and the opportunity to see Silva if he can win his 17th in a row and, if he can win his 11th straight title defense. These things are unprecedented. They've never happened. And, so you take them for what they are. And if the super fights happen, they'll be a great event for mixed martial arts in the UFC, and everybody will be really excited, I'm sure.
We're talking to Josh Gross, ESPN.com MMA writer. And one guy that I have really started to get into, or I could say, was Roy Big Country Nelson. Now, Big Country is in an interesting intersection in his career after being beat in his last UFC fight, and now he's basically a free agent. What are your thoughts and feelings on where he will end up? And you know, we were talking as he was possibly a contender for the heavyweight. Do you see him as that or not anymore?
No, I don't. I think every time he's run into an upper echelon heavyweight, he's stumbled. And I'm not going to call Stipe Miocic a top 5 heavyweight at this point, but it seems like whether the moment's been, a need for a huge fight, he just falls, a huge win, he falls short, or he steps up in competition and takes on a Junior Dos Santos or a Fabricio Verdum. He just doesn't have enough to win. I like Roy. I think he's an exciting, fun heavyweight to watch. Do I think that he could win a fight against Cain Velasquez? I don't. Where he ends up, honestly, I think the defeat makes it more likely that he'll stay in the UFC. Had he won that fight against Miocic, he would have been in a position to negotiate a deal after an exclusive negotiation period with Bellator. There was tons of interest from Bellator, and I think there still will be. But it would have given Nelson the right, the leverage to, I think, hold out for more, sort of feel like he's worth more. His camp was already fairly sort of displeased with the offer that the UFC had laid out before the fight with Miocic. It now sounds like, if you listen to what Mike Hogan is saying, who represents Nelson, that the current offer from the UFC is more in line with where they want to be, and clearly the loss hurts him in terms of negotiation. I think he'll stay in the octagon.
Interesting. Josh, I got to run down this card with you real fast. I want to get your thoughts on Frankie Edgar and Charles Oliveira.
Yeah, nice fight at 145. I mean, it's hard to imagine that Frankie Edgar's in line to lose his 4th straight fight, but that's what the record shows. I think he should win this one. Charles Oliveira is a dangerous featherweight. You don't want to screw around too much with him in the Muay Thai sense, and definitely not on the ground where he can throw around lots of submissions from everywhere. So I think Edgar wins. It's interesting that this is his first 3-rounder in the last 7 fights. He's a slow starter, so he won't have a lot of time to rally. So he's got to pick it up pretty quick. I think Oliveira is aggressive enough where he's going to force Edgar into doing that. I think Frankie probably wins the decision.
Okay. What about Tim Kennedy and Roger Gracie?
Yeah, well, interesting for Kennedy. I mean, he made a lot of comments prior. I mean, this is his UFC debut. He made some comments that got some news interest about UFC fighter pay. Maybe not the best way to introduce yourself to the people who work around the UFC and the brass itself. He backtracked a little on that. So you wonder where he is mentally in fight week, being around the company for the first time. For Roger Gracie, extremely talented grappler, who's coming around on the striking. I think he's figured out that he's not a guy that's going to pack a lot of pop, so he's got to use his length, play the jab. If he ties up, he's pretty good with knees and the Muay Thai clinch, things like that. I picked Kennedy, but I don't feel strongly really either way on this one. It's a 50-50 fight. I can see Kennedy winning because of his strength and his submission defense, but again, he's fighting Roger Gracie. If you give up a bad position, it's difficult to escape from.
Let me ask you this: Do you think Roger Gracie is going to be able to take Tim Kennedy even down?
Probably not. I mean, I can see him pulling guard. Kennedy, maybe slips up, but no. The idea that Roger Gracie can shoot a single or a double on Kennedy and finish it is pretty unlikely.
Cub Swanson and Dennis Silver. What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, but nice fight at 145. This is a good card if you like middleweights and featherweights. Swanson's a guy who's looked extremely explosive. He's come into his own. Dennis Silver's looked tremendous since moving down from lightweight. This is going to be a telling fight. I think the winner here has got a good case as a maybe not quite next in line, but almost next in line for a title shot against Jose Aldo. So lots of things at play here. Seaver's striking is not the most traditional. He uses a lot of kicks, spinning back kicks. He keeps distance sort of in an odd way. But in the end, I think Swanson's speed and his power will be the difference makers. I don't know if he's got enough to put away Seaver. He clearly hits hard enough to do it, but Seaver's pretty good defensively. He deflects and shoulder rolls, and he's hard to catch square. So I don't know that Swanson will. But I think in the end, Swanson does enough offensively to win a decision.
Last, and what's your thoughts on Mark Munoz and Tim Bodish?
This is an interesting fight at 185. I think, Munoz, if he's negotiated through recovering from injury well, he certainly is capable of beating Tim Boetsch, who's a hard-nosed guy who is skilled but doesn't show a ton of skill. He's sort of very, he keeps the basics and he's good at those things. But he's also extremely gifted in terms of the strength department, which I think will match up well against Munoz. I'm picking Boetsch, but it's with the caveat that says, if Munoz is 100% and he looks good coming into the fight, he's got such a high motor, and if he gets any kind of momentum, he can beat Boetsch. But I'm going to pick the Barbarian in this one. I think he's got enough, especially with Munoz's layoff, to win this.
Wow, interesting. One last thing. I was reading about Dana White saying that he was going to take away fighters' bonuses. What are your thoughts on that, and do you believe it?
Well, he was saying it in the context of finding money to pay undercard fighters more. So it's not like he's just removing this and saying, screw you guys, I'm not going to give you any more bonuses. I don't quite understand why he would need to remove the bonus structure to pay fighters more. I think the question always is what percentage of the UFC take is going to fighters. And it seems like the UFC, though they acknowledge that maybe guys in the undercard should be making more, they're not willing to give up any more of what they're making to do it. And so I think that's still the question. That was what we examined in early 2012 when ESPN did a large sort of look at what the fighter pay issue is in the UFC. The UFC bonus structure, they'll pay for knockout and KO and sub, but they've always, at least over the last 7-8 years, had a habit of doing the discretionary bonuses, these locker room bonuses. And my understanding is that that's become less and less a commonplace in the last year or so. I think it's interesting and important for the UFC to discuss these issues and say, well, fighters are complaining, what can we do about it? But it's also a slippery slope for them because once they open the door for that, it may give fighters the feeling that, hey, if we stick our ground here, we can really make a difference and an impact, and the UFC will cave to our demands. I don't know. It could be interesting in terms of labor issues down the line. I think that's a long way off. But look, I think on the one hand, it's good that the UFC is exploring these things. On the other hand, I'm not sure that removing the bonus structure, which has been pretty successful for them, is necessarily the right way to go. So it's a tough one to answer, but in the end, I think we'll see some resolution here in the next year as far as this issue goes.
Josh, I do agree with you about the fighters making more on the undercard, but I'll also say this to you as well. What about the guys that, you sign your name on a dotted line, you're so excited to get in the UFC, you signed the contract. Shouldn't you honor the contract that you signed?
Well, of course. You should always honor a contract you sign, and you should, you enter into it assuming is willingly, right? No one's making you sign that deal. But the problem is that there's no place for them to go otherwise. It's like the UFC, the attitude is, look, it's the UFC. You're going to take what we give you, and that's fine. The problem is for fighters is what they're taking, it's very difficult, to make a living off of it. That's what Tim Kennedy was complaining about, and he makes more money than a lot of the guys coming into the league. So if the UFC is the dominant league in mixed martial arts, if they're the place where every fighter wants to go, it's sort of ridiculous that guys, and some still do, have to maintain a second job to survive. I mean, I think you have to get past that threshold. If you're going to be a professional sports league, the premier league in your industry, it's sort of unbecoming for athletes that are signed with the organization to have to find other means to survive, to make a living, to support their family. And it's not going to look good for the UFC in the end. It certainly doesn't help the fighters. And at a certain point, maybe there's another option, and signing with the UFC maybe isn't so appealing for guys, just simply because of that factor. So I think there's a lot of issues at play here, but none of them are too easy to deal with.
I'd like to discuss this further with you on some shows coming up in the near future, if you wouldn't mind coming back on to be a guest with us.
Yeah, anytime.
Okay, I have one last question for you. Do you think we're going to see mixed martial arts in the Olympics in the next 30 to 40 years?
Oh, man, I don't know. I mean, these guys, these clowns are trying to get rid of wrestling. So it's like, it's very difficult to say. I mean, 30, 40 years from now, I'm just guessing. I would love to see it. It seems like there's been a movement against combat sports in the Olympics. The Olympic program, it's, the boxing and the wrestling and the taekwondo and the judo, It's all components about mixed martial arts. It's all the elements. It should be. I'd love to see it, but I mean, if you're asking me for a guess, I'm going to say probably not, especially not in the form that we know it. I mean, Olympic boxing doesn't look anything like professional boxing, and maybe we wouldn't want an Olympic-style mixed martial arts. I mean, who knows what it would be like? So I'm going to say probably not, but I think I'm probably being a little pessimistic with that.
ESPN insider with MMA, Josh Gross. Thank you so much for joining us, Josh.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it coming on.
That's good stuff.
It's really good stuff.
That's all interesting.
I want to discuss that topic about fighter pay on future shows. I really do, because he brings up some good points.
He had a great point.
Great points. The guys can't really, make it a career and feed their families fighting on the undercard when they can go out and probably find a better job than making more money. Is it a better job though than going out and competing in a professional level of what your dreams are wanting to be?
Yeah.
And you know what? You know that you hit one fight at a night bonus, and all of a sudden you're making $150,000.
Yeah, we did.
So you never know when you get a submission of the night at the same time. You never know.
It brought up a good point, and I like it that he just says that Dana's not being a jerk. Just, I'm taking away these bonuses. He's putting those bonuses for the undercard guys.
Well, he said that in a roundabout way to say, you know what, I'll take that money away, and then maybe we'll take it away, and then you won't have a chance of making the bonuses. So, I mean, like, yeah, I'm going to take it away and give it to the guys in the undercard. Yeah, I agree. But then basically saying, you know what, at the same time, then you don't have a chance of making the fight of the night bonuses. What he's saying basically is quit complaining. And really, like, at the end of the day, when you sign that fight contract, and let me say this to you, okay? You signed it because this subject really
chaps you.
Chaps me, and just say it polite in a kind way. You're going to get $10,000 and $10,000 on the undercard.
Right.
Essentially, low pay $8,000, that's $16,000. Okay. You always know at the end of the night you have that chance to make $75,000. Okay, on a submission or a knockout of the night bonus. So stop complaining, man. And if you don't want to do it, don't do it. Don't go into mixed martial arts. I own 2 gyms here locally. Am I going to tell these kids, you know what, you're going to become a millionaire? I've said that to one kid in 15 years. I said, man, you can do this. You can make a career of this. I don't steer guys to say you can make millions and millions of dollars. I've only said it to one kid out of 15 years, and said, you know what, I tell people, don't quit your job yet. Don't quit your job. I want to do this. Don't put your eggs in one basket. So it's like, listen, you're not going to get rich in the UFC until you make it big.
And we're going to have more on that coming up on 101sports.com.